You remember the day you got a call from OpenAI now say, come and help us solve the problem of AI in India?
Well, I think it's a funny story, and I think meditation piece is actually the connector. That is really the bedrock of everything that I do. All of the stuff around innovation or creativity and all of that really emerges from there. When you're able to still your mind, that's when clarity emerges. That meditation practice really becomes the core.
Pragya Misra is OpenAI's first employee in India, leading the charge to make AI accessible and inclusive. With a background at Meta and Truecaller, she's tackled digital safety and misinformation.
You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. It's called Akshay.
Hello, I can hear you.
Can you tell me what the real reason for meditating on this light in your heart is?
Focusing on light in the heart helps.
You are already addicted to meditation, which is the ultimate drug. If we all will have our agentic AIs doing the work for us, what will become the purpose of people's lives? Welcome to The Awakening Code, a podcast where we explore extraordinary stories in the intersection of innovation, AI, purpose, self-discovery, and finally the human connect. And today's guest is somebody I know for some time, but more importantly, she's a leader across multiple domains. Pragya Misra leads public policy and partnership at OpenAI, literally the first employee here in India. Before that, she was at Truecaller, where she was exploring and working towards killing spam calls. We know it's a huge problem out there. And then at Meta, she was exploring the world of misinformation and how technology is used to fight this very big menace in society. But apart from her technology hat, she's had some incredible achievements. She is an international level golfer. Be that. And not only that, while we all think we are great at negotiating when we go to the local sabzi market, she actually has a diploma in negotiations and bargaining from the London School of Economics. I mean, Pragya, this is truly extraordinary. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Vishal. As you were sort of saying all these wonderful things, I was trying to identify, is that really me or is that someone else?
I did not mention the part of the heartfulness meditation teacher. You're not just a meditator. You are actually even teaching people meditation. So, this is like the entire package. So, first of all, tell me, how does all these various things connect?
I think the meditation piece is actually the connector. That is really the bedrock of everything that I do. And it's the subliminal kind of foundational value that I have, which everything else rides over that, honestly. And so, all of the stuff around innovation or creativity and all of that really emerges from there, because when you're able to still your mind, that's when clarity emerges. And so often when there's so much coming at you constantly, my meditation practice really helps me center myself and actually get that clarity on what do I do next. That next could be what do I do today in my day, or it could be really simply what would I like to do 2 or 3 years from now, or what is it going to look like in a decade. And so often that meditation practice really becomes the core and really the driving factor in everything that I've been doing. And I remember when I would be watching obviously television shows or reading autobiographies or biographies, and you look at people who've achieved so much and you read all their accolades and you feel, oh my God, that's a lot, right? And like, how do they do everything? And as you know, Vishal, because you've also achieved so much in your own career and life, that it all happens actually step by step. And, and at some point in your life, you start to receive exponential outcomes out of all the small, tiny things that you've been doing and investing as you've been growing up, right? So whether that's what golf contributed to me as a personality or just my own character, or what being an entrepreneur again helped me understand about myself and what I'm capable of and pushing limits, or everything else that has come after that. But it's really been, how can I develop more self-awareness, and what is really my role and my contribution to the world when I leave it, right? And I don't talk about legacy. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying when I live every day, is there something that I can uniquely contribute to every interaction, to every conversation, to every little piece of work that I do? Can I really give it my 100%, but do it in a detached way? And that often is the most tough part.
But talking about detachment, let me first go back to when you were still growing up in school. That time it's all about academics, it's all about homework and schoolwork. Sports in India is already on the back burner. And in your case, forget sport, you took up golf, which is not even considered as a sport. It is something which is more considered as a weekend leisure activity. So how did golf happen, and what did it take you to become the best in the world?
Not best in the world, but certainly
Amongst the best in the
yes,
world.
yes. Well, I did a lot in India, I would say, for sure. I think it's really to do, a lot to do with my parents. And my father was in the Indian Navy, and so he played a lot of squash. He was ranked the top 3 in the country, and so for him, just going to the club even after he'd retired and was not really competing. But I spent a lot of my time, a lot of my evenings after school, being, on top of the gallery in the squash court, watching him play with his friends or cheering him on. And therefore, for me, sport was very much an integral part of me growing up, because my father thought that was really important. And my mother was really the one who took me to all of these classes, right, from one place to the other, and waiting. And so immense amount of patience and commitment that my parents have put in, for me to be able to do these things. And so obviously there's deep gratitude. But I don't think when they put me in these classes, they ever thought that sport would become like the mainstay for me for a long time. But I wasn't ever discouraged. It was always a carrot for my mother, because I hated studying. So it was every time the argument or the negotiation was, if you finish your class 10th, you go get to play in Malaysia, you go get to play in Singapore, or all of these international tournaments that I really wanted to go and play. And so it was really a very smart negotiation card that she had in her back pocket for me to do whatever she wanted me to do at that point. But I think it's the most important and critical thing you can do for character building. Because there's also research which says that most people who play sport and competitive sport while growing up actually make for really effective leaders. And that's because unknowingly and subconsciously, as you're playing a team sport and you're interacting with people, you learn a lot about team building. You learn about, just being extremely self-aware. And I think the most important skill, which is you learn how to deal with failures. Because in a sport like golf, you're actually failing more than you're succeeding. So every day when you're going out there and you're playing a tournament, you're probably losing and not winning most of them. And you probably win 1 or 2 in a year. And that really keeps you going. So what do you do in those lows, and how do you manage yourself? If you learn a lot of that early on in your life, I think it prepares you and really primes you for what is to come in your adult life.
And it's interesting, because I too started my career as a sportsman. I used to play volleyball at a national level.
Oh, very interesting.
And that's exactly what I tell people, that sport teaches you how to fail, how to deal with failure. But the next day you have to go back in the ground, motivate your team, and go back to play. The education system is all about winning and getting high marks. You are not experiencing as much of failure, while sports is all about failure, but at the same time getting up and getting back on the ground. And I think
100%.
these are values which are immense. And I think leadership skills are developed as a sports person and not as an MBA, is what I always say.
100%, right? And also, like, the value of building authentic human connections. You learn that early on because you build friendships. I've built most of my friendships on the golf course, because when you're down and out and you're in that dump where, to your point, when you lose, you need a whole community around you. And similarly in meditation, like, you need your sangha, who can sort of really, who you can talk to, who you can sort of, have these real conversations and be vulnerable, so that when you actually go out the next day, you can show up and be 100%.
Now, tell me, golf is not a usual sport for somebody as a kid to take up, right? It's very expensive. You have to spend day hours. I mean, it's not something which gets over in 30 minutes or 1 hour or 2 hour. Golf, you spend a day at the golf course. So how did this work with your academics, and weren't your parents a little concerned that, hey, you know what, are we losing Pragya to the golf course, and is there a career at the end of this?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, when I started playing golf, it was just a coincidence. I was actually playing a lot of tennis. That's how I started. I'm a single child, so my mother was very happy to get me out of the house and get into a tennis class. And so I started when I was in Jaipur. I still remember the racket was taller than me when I started, but I was often there just skipping or running or doing other things, and I got onto the tennis court much later. But my academy in Madras, we moved to Madras, and my academy in Madras shut down
So
for some
because of
renovation.
your father's Navy career, you kind of moved all over the country.
No,
right?
so he had quit by then.
Okay.
This was more because he had his own sort of personal, commitment that he wanted to, really try meditation all in. So we moved to Madras for that, because the then spiritual guru was there. And so my father was like, all in. So let's just go, let's move. And my mother was like, are you serious? Like, we're moving from Jaipur to Madras. And
who was the spiritual guru in Madras?
yes. So I follow this heartfulness technique of meditation. And so, we have a legacy of about 4 gurus already. There is a history and heritage of over 80 years of this practice. And so the third guru in this succession, his name was Parthasarthi Rajagopalachari, and he was actually based in Chennai. And my father met him in 1990. And that's how we started this practice. And so I've really grown up in the practice. But he was like, yes, this, I think, is the purpose of my life. And I'm really going to sort of meditate and find what it takes to really live this life, because everything else seems to be so transient. So what is it that is permanent? And maybe my meditation practice is going to take me there. So I had the privilege of really growing up in this system and having an anchor that I can keep falling back to no matter what. But of course, I had my own journey. And so to really coming back, we moved to Chennai, and my golf academy shut down. I mean, my tennis academy shut down for some time. And the golf course was right next to the academy. And so logistics were very much in place. And my mother was like, you like it or you hate it. This is where you're going to be spending the next 3 hours of every evening until the tennis academy opens up. And typical misnomers about golf, which is, oh my God, it's an old man's game. It's so slow. I'm so bored. Like, why are you putting me here?
I have not been able to take up golf even now.
Yeah.
Even though the golf course is just next to my house.
I can imagine. And so I had the same kind of apprehensions that you were sort of going through. And but I started playing, and, I must have been, I think, about 13, 14 at the time. And there was a junior tournament, and I competed in it, and I played well, and I won. And, as a child, when you win at something and you sort of start to believe that you're good at it, then you want to do more and more of it. It also, I think, created a good network of friendships for me, because, like I was saying, I came from a completely new city. It was a different language. It was a different school. It was like starting from zero all over again. And so for me, where I found more friends and I found a conducive environment, then I wanted to obviously be in that environment much more, in something as opposed to something which is more hostile, which is more around.
So in fact, it is said that deals are done at golf courses. Policies are discussed at golf courses. So somehow you were already getting primed for this incredible career of yours, because what you were doing at the golf course is literally what you are now doing in the corridors of power.
Very often, you're right. I mean, and I think, as you think back, like today when I think back of my life, I don't think I was ever able to figure out that these little moments are going to add up and, prepare me for where I am today. And I'm sure 10 years from now, when I look back, much of what I'm doing today would have obviously prepared me for what is to come in my life. But in those moments, you just do what feels right, what you're having fun doing, and what you feel intrinsically you're good at, and gives you a lot of joy. I often, young people today ask me that, what should I do, and, how should I do this? And, they build this whole SWOT analysis around what is their strengths and what's their weakness. And I think for me, the only conversations I end up having is that, from my own personal experience, that honestly, my strength is what I enjoy doing and what gives me energy. And there is nothing like a weakness, but there are things that I know like completely suck me out. Like an admin or an accounts, like just please keep me away from all of that. But then I know that intuitively the stuff that's giving me a lot of energy is where I should be pivoting much more to in my life, because it will then automatically I will be good at it because I'm really motivated. I'm waking up every day. Trust me, nobody needs to wake me up to play a 5 a.m. golf game. Today I play in the morning because then I can get to work during the day. I play at 5:15 in the morning, at the crack of dawn. I'm at the Delhi Golf Club, not in the last 6-7 months because this role has been rather demanding. But
And Delhi pollution is also being a challenge. Yeah.
absolutely. But I'm there, right? Because nobody needs to tell me. And that's been as a child. But the same thing you ask me, maybe to get up and like, do an accounts class. Hell no. That's not my cup of tea, right? So yeah.
Golf has taken you to many parts of the world, and of course, I'm sure you've met some incredible legends in the world of golf too. So tell me about how was it traveling the world as a teenager, playing this game of golf, which India is not known for, right? I mean, when I think of golf, you're thinking of somebody who is white and West. And maybe I know Korea is very big in golf. So normally
Massive.
it's either Korea or somewhere in the West. I have not really, of course, Jeev Milkha Singh is there, but outside of Jeev Milkha Singh, I have not really heard too much about golf in India.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we didn't have many role models, and certainly no women role models while I was growing up, right? So you were always looking at a Tiger Woods, or if you looked more closer to home, like a Jeev or a Jyoti, and really seeing what their career was like or what were they doing in their life. But that really didn't map for what my career would look like if I wanted to really pursue golf, because the men's tour looks very, very different in terms of opportunities, in terms of rewards, even just financial rewards that the men's tour offers vis-a-vis obviously women's golf. So you're right. I mean, I think somewhere my parents were like, at some point, she's going to figure out what she wants to do. And so they let me sort of play golf as long as I could. And then, of course, when you finish college, there's this moment of reckoning where you're like, can I truly be the top 50 in the world with the kind of golf I'm playing today in the environment that I'm playing around? And so it's that moment of self-reckoning where you look at yourself and you're like, can you really be top 50 in the world? And if you can't, then is it really worth pursuing that career? And so I had that moment right out of college where I had to really take that decision. But I think coming back to your question, it was more like my parents were like, okay, she's growing, she's learning what it takes to be independent. I think the first time I flew for a golf tournament all by myself, I was 14 years old. We went to Thailand to represent India in the Asia Pacific Golf Championship. And I think just sort of, often people talk of the Olympics. I've never had the chance, golf wasn't part of the Olympics back then. But that was like my moment of sort of wearing, the Indian flag and, looking at the Indian flag, fluttering in front of, amongst all the other Asia Pacific flags. And I was just really proud, right? Because golf is an independent sport. And then suddenly you have this moment where you're not only playing for yourself, but you're playing for something much bigger for your country. And you're making sure that India sort of shows up, at least in the Asia Pacific, in the top 5, top 6, of the various countries that are competing. So I think for me, early on, I started to kind of understand that the minute you have a goal that is far bigger than yourself, if you have a vision that is far bigger than just your own vision for yourself, you put 110% towards that.
But at the age of 14, you were representing India.
Yeah.
You started meditating. I mean, for a kid trying to concentrate for 1 minute on something is difficult. And you took up meditation at that early an age. How did that happen? And was it like very easy or was it challenging to start with?
No. I mean, like they say, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So literally it was, when you are standing on that high pressure part and you're sort of, 14, 15 years old and your hands are shaking and your heart is beating at 150 beats per minute. And you can feel your heart pounding, right? And you know that because your body is reacting that way to pressure and to anxiety, that there has to be some way for me to regulate that. And so then, because my parents were already meditating, it just even more reiterated to me that I needed to do this for my regulation of my mind. And does that mean at 15 I understood what it was doing for me? Honestly, not. It was just like, yeah, I have to fix this problem. My mind wanders everywhere. I'm not able to play good golf. I'm not able to win. So this seems to be the most reasonable thing to do. And everyone is doing it. Tiger Woods apparently does it. All my role models were doing it. So let me give it a shot. And it was easily accessible to me. So, I started with that goal. Never imagined that it's going to be the one anchor that I come back to no matter what happens in my life, whether that's my personal life or my professional life. This is that one constant anchor that I come back to for my peace and for my calm. So, it's not like I had some big plan while I was meditating when I was 15 years old. I just did it because it helped me win. And, often you start things like that where, you think it's going to give you something, it starts to give you, and then you keep succeeding. And so you do it more and more. And I think it's the same thing with discipline in life, or it's the same thing with, for me, for journaling, or, where as I wrote more and more, I got much more clarity around what I need to do. Or it could simply be, writing my goals, because often in golf, or in any other exercise, you want to know which direction you're going in. And as I started to write much of it, it started to come true. And so even today, I really practice that, right? Where
And who was telling you about all these journaling and writing your goals? At the age of 14, I mean, kids don't know all these things, right?
So, it's really a function of your coach, right? Because you are like competing and you're in that whole bubble where all you're thinking about is just going to school, coming back, practicing, and having this disciplined life. And then you go back again to school. I mean, those are the only 2-3 things that I was honestly doing in my growing up years. And in some ways, in that living in that bubble really helped me, because, all of this stuff that I now hear about young people struggling with, I'm like, what is that? Like, what is this whole thing about, getting into relationships or having crushes when you're 14, 15, 16. Yes, I went through that. I had a bunch of my friends, but all I was focused was, can I beat this guy in on the basketball court when I go out in school? Like, I was never looking at them as, oh my God, he's really cute. Like, I want to go out with him. It was more like, can I kick his ass on the basketball court, right?
And did you, like normal teenagers, go and see movies or music, or did you have any of these other?
Hardly, because if you want to, wake up in the morning and sort of show up for your training, then it's tough. A lot of this entertainment is just not part of your everyday. And, I never drank any of the aerated drinks. Like, I never had a cola until I think I was 25, 26, because when I was starting to compete, my coach told me, if you drink this cola, this is what's going to do to your body, which means you cannot optimally perform. And I was like, no, that is taboo. And so I just don't drink alcohol. I'm not, I don't sort of engage in any of the other psychotropic drugs or anything like that, because your body and your mind just become the most valued thing for you.
You are already addicted to meditation, which is the ultimate drug.
It really is. I think just the bliss you experience when one meditates is you just want to keep coming back to it.
So the way I explain meditation to some of the young generations is using the example of chatgpt. So I tell them that just the way when you give a prompt, the system generates output. And the more prompts you give, the more output you get. And then these outputs hallucinate also. Similarly, a thought is a prompt given to your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And when you give it a thought, your brain will give you output. And normally it will always be, if it's about, the thought is about the past, it gives you jealousy, it gives you anger. If it's about the future, it gives you anxiety, it gives you worry. So your brain is basically doing the job of generating this content. So meditation is when you stop prompting your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And when you stop prompting your brain, now the entire brain is calm. The processor is not using any power. And that's when your body is able to rejuvenate. So now that you are working at OpenAI, are you seeing the circle fully completing?
In some way, yes. But I think the perspective with which I look at it is that I think for us to operate in our day-to-day, we need a certain level of intelligence, which then gives me that time so that I can work on myself. And so, yes, in some ways it is a full circle, but in some ways it is that because I have access to PhD level intelligence, or now with O3, even higher level of intelligence, a lot of the repetitive work, a lot of the brainstorming that I would do with someone else, and that often becomes limiting because maybe I want to brainstorm at 3 a.m. and the other person is really not available to do that, but also be able to then have this available on my phone at any time. And when you start to really do that work, and it unlocks much more time for me to, I think, to read much more, to meditate much more, and also have a lot more clarity, right? So I think in some ways a full circle, but in some ways we still have to see the impact that this technology is going to bring in our lives, whether that's at our workplace or whether that's in our home life, in our personal lives. We're of course seeing many, many different avatars where, today I use ChatGPT to help me, journal. I no longer write as much as I actually talk to ChatGPT or talk about meeting summaries. This is how my day went. These were the 5 meetings I did. Can you help me sort of curate what the next steps for this will look like? What is it that I should do as follow-ups? And all of this stuff would have taken me, 1.5 hours of writing. And now I do this while I'm walking.
In minutes.
Yeah, or while I'm walking, or I'm on a treadmill, or I'm doing some other activity, and I can kind of do this. So instead
And tell me, how much do you meditate in a day? Do you have like a fixed schedule or do you have like a ritual around it?
So I wouldn't call it a ritual, and I'll say why. Because I think the ritual, in some way to me, suggests that it becomes very mechanical. And I think the whole idea of meditation is being 100% present and doing it with an open attitude and being 100% there. And so, yes, I have a meditative sort of technique, and in Heartfulness we have 3 parts to that technique. The morning is a meditation practice, which is more about, like we were saying earlier, the mind has a tendency to run everywhere, and there's a constant chatter.
The monkey mind.
Exactly. And that's because its tendency is to be active all the time. Whereas the tendency of the soul is really to be at rest, to be at peace. And so how can I really plug into that constant, I would say, the tendency of the soul, which is to really rest. And so in the morning, the meditation practices for about 20 minutes, half an hour. You can meditate for longer, but typically at the least, I try and take out 20 minutes to half an hour to meditate. And it's an approach where, you close your eyes, it's a silent meditation, and you anchor yourself in this thought that there is divine light already present in my heart and that it's attracting my attention. Now, just by saying this doesn't mean that I'm going to get peace or I'm even going to be able to sit with that emotion for very long. But the idea is that your mind will wander and let it wander. It's absolutely fine. But when it does and you feel like you're getting too far engaged, again, remind yourself and bring yourself back to this anchor thought that, I'm sitting in meditation. And we often say that treat thoughts as, clouds in the sky. Just observe them. Just see how they're passing you by. And that's perfectly fine.
The sky is always clear. The clouds will go away.
Exactly. And so in that moment, as you meditate more and more, you are often then able to, in the early on, get glimpses of that thoughtless state. And then as you meditate more, that just expands. So in that 20 minutes, maybe early on you had 2 seconds of it. But eventually, as you keep meditating, along with the trainer and along with this meditation practice that we have, you will see that you can experience this state of samadhi, which, the Bhagavad Gita talks about or Ashtanga Yoga talks about, with this complete state of thoughtlessness for sometimes even all of the 20 minutes, or all of the half an hour that you meditate. And I think that is just so not only rejuvenating, but in that stillness, you get that peace that you're looking for. And because you feel peace inside of you, in no matter which context you show up, you also radiate that peace. And so inner peace for global peace is something that we talk about all the time. But, we want to drive global peace by, no, Vishal needs to be peaceful. This camera person needs to be peaceful. I am perfectly fine. I don't need to fix myself. So I think the meditation practice in the morning reminds me of that. And then I carry that connection with me all through the day, or at least I try to. Of course, there are moments that I sort of, meander and wander away. But there is that self-awareness that yes, I did wander away. Now I need to come back and make that connection. And then the evening practice is really about cleaning, because through the day, your subconscious has, accumulated a lot of these impressions. I'm talking to you right now. There is a lot that I'm taking away subconsciously about this interaction. And while we don't know, we carry these impressions, or what we call samskars, not only through the day, but through our lifetimes. And we are not aware of that. But those are the reasons why we react to certain things the way we do, or often these repeated patterns that keep showing up in our life, and we think it's to do with the other person. My boss is bad, my partner is not great, my mother is always causing me trouble, why do I always have these issues? But it's actually these patterns that we carry, which often make us resonate at a certain level, and which is why we attract these things. And so the cleaning process is more about, can I really clear out a lot of these patterns, and can I clear out a lot of these complexities and impurities so that I can become simple and pure? And so it's a very scientific technique on, can I clear out, can I empty the glass so that I'm ready to fill it up again the next day?
In the world of browser, you have to clear cache. There's a lot of cache memory.
Absolutely. And so when you're able to clear that, and then you're ready to sort of receive the next day what your meditation practice is to bring, then all of this stuff that intellectually we try and sort, that I need to be more patient, Pragya, I shouldn't get angry in that moment. Come on, stop getting triggered by what this situation brings to you or that situation brings to you. All of that starts to become far more natural, because I'm spending this time to clear out that cache, to change and to grow. And so you're able to look at the same situation very, very differently.
So whether it is international golf or meditation, somehow you manage to reach the top of whatever you are doing. I mean, Meta, for example, India runs on WhatsApp. Not just India, now a lot of the world is using WhatsApp too.
True.
And it's not just about WhatsApp. WhatsApp, while is a great tool for information, it was also being used for misinformation. So somehow you managed to now become part of this incredible team which was working to solve that problem. To walk me through, how do you navigate such a complex issue involving so many different stakeholders, all having different interests?
I mean, great question, right? And I think massive credit to just the leadership at WhatsApp at that time to really own up to what was going wrong, and then seeing what is it that we can do to solve it genuinely, not because the company was against the corner or pushed against the corner, which we were at that point when I got hired, but it was really came from a true place to say that, yes, we created, or rather the founders created this tool for good, for making communication very easy. And it did do that, and also do it in a very private way, in a very confidential way because of encryption. But that there were obviously repercussions and negative repercussions that were leading to real world harm. And what can we do to really solve that? And so we all sort of, when I joined, the team globally was already thinking, what is it that we can do? And there were many product changes that WhatsApp made, even at the cost of lower engagement, which at that point...
I remember they restricted the amount of forwards you could do, the groups, and while everybody thought that's going to cut virality, but that actually did contribute in reducing a lot of the misinformation.
Significantly, right? And also then... clubbing that with a lot of education. So, when I joined, we ran education programs with civil society and went out and did a lot of education around how do you identify misinformation? What is the different kinds of misinformation that is there? There is political disinformation, there is social misinformation, there is opinions, there are jokes. How do you really get through that nuance? And so...
I think call it the WhatsApp university.
Yes, exactly. And, it's even true today where, I have my own family groups. Even today, there'll be some message about, either something in the Kumbh Mela or something about, India. And, while all of that is great, but I think if it's rooted in some facts, it'll really help. And so I'm always that fact checker.
A lot of people believe all these forwards, right? That's the most incredible part.
And so therefore the education campaign was significantly important, like doing it in schools, doing it in villages, doing it in a very collaborative way. I think the fundamental was that we have to do this and we have to solve for this in a collaborative way. How can we bring government, civil society, researchers, academicians all on board to help us solve this, while we can bring change on product, but that's not going to bring the change in society and awareness around this very complex problem.
And that's the best part, right? You found yourself on the forefront of solving a very big issue in the society. I think WhatsApp, there have been, so many like bad things which have happened because of this information. We know of so many crimes and, even, there have been lynching attacks and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So that was a very complex issue. So do you remember an occasion where you were interacting, again, we don't need names, but an occasion where you had to interact with some really top bureaucrats or government officials and convince them that why your approach is better than what the government wanted you to do?
So, I think even the government at that point was, figuring out what's the right way to solve this. I don't think there was anyone who claimed to have the answer. I think we were all figuring it out. And look, misinformation is not something that just emerged in the 21st century. We've had it for centuries. Where
Ever since there was information created, there was misinformation.
Exactly. And therefore bringing on, researchers to really help understand the complexity of the problem, and then what can we do in the world of technology to make this easier. So I think nobody claimed to have the answers. Everyone was very open to brainstorming and figuring out what the potential solutions could be. But I think because the intent was so true, we were able to then eventually, to a certain degree, at least curb it. I don't think it's been solved.
And it's real kudos to Meta and the WhatsApp team, the way they have been able to navigate through all the issues which were there. Of course, while I know WhatsApp still has issues, but it is far, far better than what it was before.
And that's really because of what I was sharing with you earlier, that, the leadership genuinely and very authentically wanted to find ways to solve this. It was not one of those, say in the press, we take this very seriously and then do nothing about it, right? I think there was a very clear mandate around, these are the 5 things we're going to do. This is what we're going to do in product. This is what we're going to do, with our stakeholders. And we want to bring everyone along in this journey. So, of course, there were very, very difficult conversations during that time. But I think everyone really saw also the positive that the technology brought. While, of course, there was all this around misinformation and lynchings that took place, but the 95% of value add that it brought to small and medium-sized businesses, or this homegrown business, sitting in Chennai where, a lady was like, she had just given birth to a child and then the child had gone to school and now she had much more free time, which is typical. And most working women are not able to come back to the workforce because of the limitations. But then she started her own boutique at home and started to sell on WhatsApp, which was provided for free.
There's no business which cannot use WhatsApp in India, right? It's part of the fabric itself.
Yeah. But in 2018, it was like, everyone was like, yes, all of this is happening, but it is giving me so much more in terms of positive, and how technology is really helping me, unlock a lot of relationships, unlock business, unlock income, and also contribution to GDP significantly, right? And so that was really the exciting part for me.
So tell me, diploma in bargaining, did that help in any of these things?
It's
By the
so
way, you're the first
ago.
person I know who actually has a degree which says, I am from London School of Economics, I know how to bargain.
I don't know
what a nightmare if you go to Khan Market.
Yeah, or I'm in like, we're in Bombay, so if I'm on Linking Road, beware.
Yeah.
I think my bargaining powers really come in when I have to sort of, negotiate earlier on, of course, with my parents. And now, I think it's a very important skill, jokes apart. I think, especially as a woman, it seems non-intuitive, but we're very bad at asking for things which we feel we deserve. And, it's not so much about the traditional bargaining and negotiations, but often building that self-awareness and saying, look, even when I sort of talk about when I switch jobs, and where do I value myself, or how do I benchmark myself? And there's enough and more information around how equity of pay for women just doesn't exist. And so to a very large extent, saying that, look, I think this is the value I bring to this role, and if that's what it is, then this is what I think I deserve. And but saying it in the right way and being able to show your value and quantify that value, I think is what I learned in that course, right? Like, how do you really bring that to the table?
No, it is said that you don't get what you deserve. You get what you negotiate and what you bargain. And given that you had degrees in both, that took you to your next job at Truecaller.
Yes.
And Truecaller again, right? I mean, 500 million users in India or some crazy number. Like how
so
many?
400 million recently, and then like 80% of that is in India.
Yeah,
You're right.
so I mean, 4,
very
5,
large part.
I mean, it's a huge. And again, if you are in India, you have to have Truecaller on your phone because we are inundated with spam calls. And now with all the scams happening of, try people calling you, the digital arrest happening, this world has become so unsafe. It is said that there is absolutely zero chance of you getting pickpocketed in India because you don't have a wallet. But the probability of you getting spam called and your bank account being empty is so much more higher. So tell me, at Truecaller, how did you work on this problem?
I mean, it was a massive motivation. I think just the company starting with a very fundamental principle on safety was a big part of why I think I also joined Truecaller, right? I could see in my daily life how much it was taking away in terms of time when you pick up these spam calls, and also the safety element. When I joined Truecaller, one of the first initiatives I drove was around women's safety. And that's something that's really close to my heart. And I think when women start to feel safe in digital communication, there's a lot more that they can unlock and contribute towards. And I think that became the driving factor of running that campaign, on saying, we realized that 50% of our user base were actually women, and they said that Truecaller is their first line of defense against harassment. And that was because they were able to know who's calling them. And so they took that decision on whether to pick up that call or not take it. Often if they picked it up and there was a challenge, they could block on Truecaller. But when I ran the campaign, I was like, and again, the whole team and leadership and Alan and Nami and, Rishit.
By the way, I know Alan and Nami for over 10 years, literally when they started Truecaller.
Oh, great
Great
leaders.
guys,
Just
yeah.
incredible, right? And India is a special place for both of them. And so I think when we started this campaign, it was like, can we extend the digital blocking and also bring change in the real world? And so, one of the main initiatives was, can we really collaborate with local police? And we did that with, the Delhi police around the country, to say that not only do you block on Truecaller, but can you actually report them within law enforcement? And so, again, the law enforcement was cybercrime.gov. They already had a website. Everything was in place. Really just credible work that the government is doing on this. And what we said to them, we just created awareness that you're not expected to walk into a police station where you feel threatened. All you need to do is, from the comfort of your home, file a complaint on this website. So just creating that awareness, and also saying, if you've had financial fraud, just call 1930. And I think a lot of that work we augmented with everything that the government was doing. And so I think it just helped drive a lot of this knowledge around what can you do to stay safe in your digital communication. And I think that I really love doing, right? And I think the other misnomer was, everything that Truecaller does is, a violation of privacy. And I think that was another big narrative that we kind of tried to work together on through education and awareness, to say, you are getting an equal amount of value by just downloading Truecaller and using it, and that not everything is around your contact phone book. So I feel the motivation for me in each of my roles have been, can I really create impact, not just on product, but how can I extend that to the real world and really in some way contribute towards, in a small tiny way, contribute towards bringing change in society as well.
So first you solve the problem of misinformation, then you
contribute.
Contributed to solve the problem of misinformation, then the whole idea of spam calls. Do you remember the day you got a call from OpenAI now to say, come and help us solve the problem of AI in India?
Well, I think it's a funny story, and I think it brings back to really my meditative practice. I was very happy at Truecaller. Everything was going really well. And then, Sam Altman decides to come to India, and I'm in that room hearing him talk, with Satyan on this fireside chat. And he's talking about how AI is going to be the most transformative technology in society. And while we had experienced ChatGPT by then a little bit, but it was mostly around, hey, like, can you write a poem for me? Or can you write the story for me? And it was already, there was a lot of fun element, but we had not really seen it contribute significantly the way it does today in our work and personal life. But I felt like, if that's where the world is going, like, I would love to sort of work for this company. This leader looks really cool. It feels like, he wants to change the world for better. And I aligned with a lot of what he was saying around how AI is going to be allowing for a lot more abundance and create a world where people will have much more. And so scarcity will not be a challenge. And so when I sort of heard all of those things, and I was like, this could be really cool and interesting. But did I ever know that there was a path to getting hired in India at that time? Not at all. But later in the year, thanks to, like all of the people I have worked with through the years. And I think, like I was saying, it brings me back to my meditation practice of first giving that thought that I really want to work for this company and with this leader.
Did you actually manifest? Do you believe in manifestation?
In some ways, yes, because, to your earlier point, I think the thought is very, very powerful. And that is why it's important to control where we put that energy. And meditation is that regulation where can I constantly think about positive or good things, because that is how I am going to define my future. But very often when we just sit in idle and we're just chilling, we let our mind just go wherever. Because you can't see where my mind is going. So I feel it's okay even if I think about all the stuff that's not great. But it's impacting me. And so in some ways, yes, it's important to regulate your mind so that it brings to you what you really want. Because the more you think about it, that's what you're going to get. And so I think for me in that way, I was spending a lot of time saying, I think it could be really cool to work for this company. And as I started thinking about it, the doors automatically started to open. And I think, like I was saying, because of the people I have worked with, I think nobody in this world can confidently say, I alone did A, B, C. I think there's a whole set of people who enable you, who help you. And that could be, my manager at WhatsApp, who really sort of taught me how to deal with crisis. And he told me something very interesting, which was Maya Angelou's saying, which is, it's not about the work. It's often about the way you make people feel. And I think that really resonated and stayed with me. And so, I've always had sort of cheerleaders around me who've mentored me and helped me. And similarly, when this role at OpenAI opened up and they were looking for somebody to hire in India, just because of maybe the decent work I've done, there were a lot of people who recommended my name, and that's how it sort of opened up and the conversation started. And I'm here now, which is absolutely incredible and amazing. I love working at OpenAI. I think the leaders are incredible, the vision that they have, and also the fact that India is a very important part of a lot of the thinking that they're doing within the company. And Sam himself just loves India, right? And he was here earlier this year in February. And you can very clearly see that we still haven't figured out India as a company, but I think every leader is committed to making OpenAI successful in India, because if we want to be able to achieve our mission of benefiting AGI, all of humanity, India is a very large part of that humanity, and we want to get that right.
But once again, right, AI is no longer about AI. AI is about how will governments, will people, how will we keep the world safe with AI? The conversation is all around safety, responsibility, about removing the bias. And recently, there is an entire discussion about India having its own foundation model. Now, between all these conversations, what is it that you are seeing happening in India and in the world, the way policy is going around it?
So I will first talk a little bit about what I'm seeing in terms of users, right? I think DPI really changed the way India looks at technology, because we have seen it.
If you can expand what
Yeah,
DPI
of course,
is for
absolutely.
everyone else, yeah.
So digital public infrastructure is a thought that was really sort of emerged in India, where it was like, how can we lay the infrastructure, which is like the rails, the public infrastructure in the tech world, so that private innovation can take place over that public rails. UPI is a prime example of that, where you have the interconnections, and then you have the various private companies like Google Pay, Paytm, Phone Pay, others coming in and saying, how can we really allow for a lot of these UPI transactions to take place. So public infrastructure with really private innovation on top. And so I think we have seen how that has unlocked digital lending, access to a lot more financial transactions, the trinity of JAM, which is Jandhan, and also making sure Aadhaar, and, obviously a lot of the monetization that has started to take place after that, allows for India to already become early adopters of technology, because we have benefited significantly from it. With 900 million smartphones, with where we sit with India, I think everyone, compared to the rest of the world where there's a lot of skepticism, I think here it's more about, tell me, how do I use it? Tell me, how is it going to change my life today? Because I see that it's going to change, and it's going to help me really be at the cusp of the whatever I'm doing, whether that's professionally in my own business, or it could be even in areas like agriculture, healthcare, education. And so with the ratios in our country, whether you talk about doctor to patient ratio or teacher to student ratios,
Scarcity everywhere, yeah.
exactly. And that is where I think AI can really change the game. And we're already seeing that. There is a non-profit known as Digital Green. They were one of the early kind of non-profits who worked with us in agriculture, and already seeing 30 to 35% increase in farmer income, just using our OpenAI models. And the fact that you no longer now have to type, but just speak to the model, again unlocks so much more. And it democratizes access to this immense amount of intelligence that is available to you. And, I was talking to Rikin, who's the founder of Digital Green, and he was telling me he has farmers in Bihar, UP, and they're expanding to other parts of India as well, is that now women are actually using the models much more than they have seen, the male farmers. And that's because you can just simply talk to it in your own native language. And while it's not performing extremely well in all languages, but the barrier in terms of typing and literacy has dropped almost to a very large extent, making sure that this high level, PhD level intelligence is available to you. And so it's really unlocking a lot of value. And similarly in education, there's Rocket Learning, where they are, reaching about 3 million parents and children in rural India and meeting them where they are in terms of learning outcomes, in terms of how can ChatGPT or AI in general become that tutor for you, become that buddy in your learning process. We all, as you know, Vishal, have spent so much time in tier 2, tier 3 just learning on YouTube. That there's been so much educational content on YouTube that people have been able to learn through and, build their careers around. And so I think with AI now, I don't think there is as much of what you were saying. Yes, there is fear, but I think there is much more opportunity that we see as a society, and that's what I see around me. There's a lot of optimism, there's a lot of hope and excitement that what is this going to bring to me just in the environment that I'm in.
So tell me, we clearly know that there is a China play in AI. We saw what DeepSeek did, and there are so many Chinese models coming up. And there is, of course, the play from the West with OpenAI, Google, Meta. Given that you are looking at India, what role do you think India will be playing in this entire game?
I think being just the largest developer community outside the US, and now with the Startup India program that PM Modi launched, and now we are seeing founders actually being celebrated, one of them being you, and just allowing for many people to take this path of being job creators, and as opposed to just, going out and applying for jobs. I think India is just massively well placed to develop over foundational models and really look at application layer very, very significantly. That's how I see a lot of what India's contribution can be.
And do you think it's too late for India to now go and start making our own foundation model?
It's tough to say. I just feel that where we sit today, it's more about opportunity cost. We have, each one of us has limited resources. Should I put it here or there? And I think where I really see a lot of the value being created would be in the application layer, for sure. That could be you build on any model. But I think the value that we can bring is solving India-specific problems at population scale and really understanding what it takes to solve that problem.
And then there's this entire debate of open versus closed. And I know that this is again something which OpenAI, the name itself is OpenAI, but it is still not clear whether it is open or closed. So which direction is the industry and in some way OpenAI thinking about this?
You're asking me all the questions to get me into trouble, so this is going to be fun. But I think Sam very clearly said this, right? He said, initially, I think a general intent is to make sure that we share as much information and we are as open and give access to our tools. And our way of being open really is we provide absolutely the best models currently available to you for free to all of our users. You have O3 Mini, which is our latest model. It's available for free. We have 4.5, which we just launched last week, available for free. So you are getting access to intelligence for free, which is like a lot of investments that we have made. But that's not because of being very altruistic, but simply saying that this is a technology that we want to be able to have access to no matter where you sit in the world, and that's really going to create value for you. I think Sam also very recently said around just that we're thinking how we can open source much more of what we are already, all the various models that we are launching. Much of what, like for example Whisper, much of our technologies for developers are actually still open source. And so you can access a lot of that. The reason why we, to a very large degree, make this a proprietary model is because if you are giving this high level of intelligence and these models available to everyone, you want to make sure that there are guardrails. And so when you talk about all the other things around bias and cyber weapons and bio weapons, etc., that this same intelligence can be used for, we make sure that those safety guardrails are put in place at pre-training level, at training level, and even at post-training. And so therefore, putting those guardrails in terms of safety, privacy, transparency is all very, very central to what OpenAI does. And I think a lot of the AI models are thinking along those lines. And so really our ethos is coming from there. But as the world evolves and we all get far more familiar with what this intelligence can do for us, I think there is an ability to slowly, steadily keep open sourcing some of those pieces so that a lot many more developers and startups can benefit. And one last thing, I think while we don't open source, I think there's a lot of work we do in terms of providing API credits, a lot of mentoring, a lot of bringing in the Indian developer ecosystem into what we're doing around the world.
So let's say we have to switch sides for a second and the Indian government says, you know what, Pragya, enough is enough. You now have to work for us and help us negotiate and create a AI policy for India. If that happens, what would be your ask from all these companies?
I think the government is already doing an incredible job.
No, forget the government. What would you specifically, if you were given this job, what will be the things you would ask for? Not just from OpenAI, from any of these companies.
Yeah, of course. I think where I find a massive gap is that, sitting so far away from the Silicon Valley bubble, we are not always up to date with what's going on. So you might read a blog, you might watch a video about what got launched, but how do I use it today in my business, in my life, as of what I'm doing today in my immediate world, and how can I monetize that to build that next big unicorn on AI? I think that is what I would try to fix. How can I bridge that gap in competence, in knowledge sharing, so that we then can start to create that flywheel which Silicon Valley has been able to create, where you have an OpenAI, you have a Gemini, you have a DeepMind, where a lot of the researchers now are now building their own sort of foundational models or building their own companies and taking that knowledge out and taking it further in the direction that they wish to take it in. I think that flywheel we've been able to create that for fintech, for e-commerce. I think we need to find a way to create that for AI.
So in fact, we just had the Mumbai Tech Week, Asia's biggest AI event.
Yeah, congratulations.
And our Chief Minister Fadnavis, who was here, talked about, yes, jobs will be lost, but they do believe it'll be a net job creator. The same thing was talked by Chandra of TCS, Tata Group, sorry.
Yes.
As well as Akash Ambani. What is your view on how will this net job be created? We know there will be many jobs which will be augmented using AI, but where will the net jobs be created?
Yeah, it's $1 million question. I wish I had that answer. I'd start working towards that right away. But I think, even the recent ad that we launched at OpenAI was really about this, that AI is going to be like electricity. And, the ad spoke about how different human inventions has led to this very sort of this society that we live in today, which we obviously consider where we're all thriving, right? And so I think every industrial revolution or every moment like this has only brought about a lot of transformation in society for the better. And so I think similarly with AI, we're going to see that yes, there will be some job displacement, but overall, in the long term, I think we're going to come out being winners. Of course, we will have to wait and see how that all plays out. And so therefore, I think all of us as foundational model builders or as startups or as government in our different roles have to play our part to make sure that we use this technology much more for good than for obviously.
So talking about technology for good, I thought that since you are into so much of meditation and AI,
Yeah.
how about having AI help us do a meditative session? So
Oh,
here
I
we
love
have-
it.
We've got together a little robot actually who's going to do that. Let me just quickly get it on.
Oh my God, this is incredible.
It's called Akshay.
Oh, okay. Who named him? Hi, Akshay. How you doing?
Hello, can you hear us?
Hello, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. So
How can I help you today?
can you guide us through a minute of heartfulness meditation? And you have to first tell us what it is. And we have Pragya here, who's an expert at meditation. And by the way, she's also working for OpenAI, so you better do a good job.
Heartfulness meditation is a simple practice focused on the heart, helping you connect with your inner self. Let's do a quick minute of this. Find a comfortable seat, close your eyes, and gently focus on your heart area. Breathe naturally, and imagine a source of light within. Let's begin.
Okay, 1 minute is up.
All right, let's gently come back. How do you feel?
Great, wonderful.
That's great to hear. If you have any questions or want to explore further, just let me know.
Yeah, we have Pragya here, and she may have some questions for you because she has to evaluate your how you guided us through this meditation.
Look, this is a ChatGPT model, so obviously you did an incredibly amazing job. But on a more serious note, can you tell me what the real reason for meditating on this light in your heart is?
Focusing on light in the heart helps cultivate inner peace and clarity. It promotes a deeper connection with yourself, reducing stress and enhancing emotional balance. It can also foster a sense of compassion and positivity.
Yeah, good job.
Incredible, great job. You saved your job. So Pragya, while we have our robot here and our AI model here, I want to talk to you about a very deep question. today we are entering a world where we are talking of AGI, artificial intelligence reaching AGI and ASI and super intelligence. In all of this, what happens to humanity? What will humans do if we all will have our agentic AIs doing the work for us? What will become the purpose of people's lives?
I don't know what the purpose of society will be, but I can certainly tell you that, often when I talk about meditation, or I can tell you basically my perspective on this, and this is a personal view, of course, is that when there will be a lot of. I love it. Akshay wants to participate in the conversation.
Let me shut it down.
Yeah, so I think I can talk a little bit about what I think I would want to happen, and this is a personal view, obviously. And I find that, very often I'm not able to meditate because there is so much that is happening around me, and there's so much I need to get done. And a lot of it is not very productive work where I need to actually step in. Often it's very routine, regular, set up this calendar, send this email, make this booking, all of that. And I feel like in an agentic world or in an AI world, when a lot of this is being done, like you were saying, by your AI agent, you have a lot more time to pursue, which I truly believe is the purpose of human life, which is human evolution, and also really going on this inner adventure of what it is that I'm here for. And for me, of course, because of my practice, I find that, my purpose is really to figure out, what is self-realization, or what am I here for, what my purpose is. And I think in a world of abundance, we will have these two options. Should I make many, many more businesses and make more millions of dollars and have higher valuations? And is that the direction I want to take and become busier and busier? Or should I use that free time to make that connection with myself and spend that time in really understanding why I'm here and what my purpose of human life really is? And so there'll always be this fork, and I'm sure there'll be many more options that will keep distracting us. So I think that honestly, this is going to be really transformational, even from a spiritual standpoint. Because even when I go and talk about meditation with other people and they say, yeah, I want to spend this time, but honestly, Pragya, I just don't have the time. Like, there's so much I need to get done through the day. And I think if we have that 2, 3, 4 hours in our day where we can maybe spend more time with family or with our own selves or working on our own selves, I think we will want to do that. I think there are enough moments in our lives where we feel the need to do that work and we're just not able to because we're all mostly always reacting to what is in front of us. And we often have to. It's not like we have a choice about it. Often we have to do that work. I need to show up to pay my bills, or I need to go do this job, or I need to show up for my family. But I think if some of it can be then outsourced to this very intelligent agent, which can do some of this tactical, routine stuff, which does not need much of my intellectual space, then I hopefully can spend a lot of time reading the Bhagavad Gita or reading a heartfulness book where I would want to spend much more of my time meditating and really finding out, what is the world about and why am I here?
In fact, you have your own podcast called Pragyan.
Yes.
So if you had to give some Pragyan, if, young people watching this who are still in college, who are all confused on what to do because suddenly the world of AI has created so much chaos in the world of jobs, learning, everything, right? You don't even know whether coding as a skill is relevant anymore. So what is your pragyan for young people in how to chart their future?
I think just coming back to, really working on yourself, building that relationship with yourself first and understanding what is that unique value you bring to the world. And then on a more tactical front, just using AI models, experimenting with it, looking around you and figuring out what is that problem that I would want to solve, and can I already start working with an AI model to solve that for me. And the good thing is, a lot of the high quality intelligence is available to you for free. So start experimenting, use it. And then automatically a lot of ideas and other things
Ask
will
the
emerge.
AI model this question on what you should be doing.
You really can. And it's a funny story because I remember when in November 2022, ChatGPT was launched, and one of the press reporters, I very distinctly remember this interview, asked Sam that, how do you going to monetize ChatGPT? And he said, oh, I'm going to ask my AI model. And everyone laughed, right? Like, oh my God, how silly is this guy? Like, he doesn't know. And today we're all doing that.
We're all doing that.
We are busy finding out business models. We are using deep research, our model, to pull out consultant level reports on what's happening in a country, in a specific vertical. Where should I open a business, or which cricket team should I acquire and buy? What are the stats, or which specific startup idea should I work on, and what is a competitive advantage that I can create? All the benchmarking. All of that is happening now very much on AI, and of course much more in terms of breakthrough in science and other things that are also happening. So I feel like just using the models and also building and working on yourself, I think that's going to be critical, because if you're not resilient, if you can't pivot, if you don't know what you're good at and what you bring to the table in terms of a soft skill and a unique contribution, I think everything else is very soon going to be commoditized. And so then really you have to work on, because everyone's going to have the same level of intelligence access as you. But how do you use that intelligence to really unlock and bring that unique value to that job, to that startup idea, is really going to make you a winner, or just anybody else.
But again, Pragya, I think it was truly a pleasure talking to you. I think the key takeaways for me has clearly been your foundation of meditation and having a very strong mental health. I think based on that strong foundation, you've been able to build a career in golf, a career at Meta, a career at Truecaller, a career at OpenAI. And in fact, the way you are going, I think you may soon, either do your own company, or you never know, you will be hired by the governments itself to kind of help pave the world when it comes to the future of AI. I'm so incredibly proud of you and so excited about what's coming up. And if this conversation resonated with you, please do share and talk about this with your friends, and also comment and tell us what you think about this. And remember that true awakening comes when you align with your own with what you truly yourself are. Your inner self and your outer self aligns, and that's what's truly happened in your case. And you have stayed centered, and that's what the Awakening Code is all about. So stay curious and stay happy and stay heartful.
Oh, thank you so very much for having me. I think I couldn't agree more with everything that you said, and the authentic self is the most important. And, if you can build that inner foundation, everything just happens. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Wishing you all the very best for massive success of this very, very interesting podcast you have launched. I think very timely, and I keep listening in. So really excited to see who all you bring on and follow you very closely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot, Pragya.
Yeah.